Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hannah, and today I'm going to be doing a June reading wrap up. So I've read 7 books this month, and I am going to pop my Storygraph stats up on the screen. That is where I put all of my ratings. Without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it. If you see me looking off this way, that's because I'm just checking to make sure I'm giving you an accurate rating on the first book that I read in June is My Dark Vanessa. This is by Kate Elizabeth Russell, and I gave this a 4.5. The premise of this book is her teacher is essentially a pedophile, and he's the R word. I don't think I can say it on YouTube, but he grooms her, manipulates her, gaslights her, and he essentially convinces her that it is love. And she, for the rest of her adult life, is dealing with this turmoil and this trauma. And he, gets old. This takes over a span of, I think, 10 years, the timeline. He gets old and she gets old, and he doesn't want her anymore because she's too old. But she still wants him because she believed that he really loved her. There are a couple of plot twists that happen. I don't want to spoil too much. But this was just a very dark, emotional, sad read. It was very hard to read. It took me several of days. I tabbed it, and every single one of those tabs is, and I missed some too, but every single one that you see are moments of basically grooming and abuse and gaslighting. And I was honestly a little taken aback by the amount of times that this teacher did these things. It was very shocking because when you're reading the story, it becomes so regular that you kind of glaze by it. At least I did a little bit. So that's why I started tabbing, because I'm like, wait a minute, let me actually keep track of how awful this guy is. And so that's exactly what I did. This is a really good read. I do recommend it. It's very eye-opening. So that was my 4.5-star read for this month. I read Twisted by Emily McIntyre. This one I gave, what did I give Twisted? Twisted was really good. I think I gave it a high rating. Yeah, 4.75. Is a dark romance. She's a billionaire heiress to a diamond company, and she doesn't work for her father, but her enemy works for her father, and they do not get along, and her enemy comes up with a plan to kind of get around the arranged marriage that her father wants to set up for her. So essentially, I mean, it says it on the back of the book, so I'm not spoiling, but essentially the male main character comes up with a plan to marry her to appease the arranged marriage ordeal. She goes along with it under the premise that she gets to still have her real lover in the picture, who is a peasant and not worthy of, inheriting this billionaire company when her father dies. So the spice in this book is out of this world. It's so good. I am a dark girly girl. I love the spice. I love the smuttiness. I love the buildup and the passion, and it's all in this book. Emily McIntyre does fabulous spice. Hey, Jenny. Hi, girl. She's joining. But anyway, this is probably one of my favorite books in the Never After series. This is book 4. There are, I think, 2 more, but this is one I recommend. It is an Aladdin reimagining, but I didn't really pick that up from the book. Some of the characters, I kind of like figured it out, like they're looking for this lamp in Egypt, and it kind of reminded me of like the genie lamp, but I didn't really, aside from that, didn't really connect the two. This was really good, and I definitely recommend reading it if you like dark romance. The next book that I read is Come Closer by Sarah Gran. This is a really short little horror possession book. It is a 3.5 rating. Pretty good. It is about this woman who, as a kid, basically made friends with a demon and let this demon in. And then as an adult, the demon finally is like, okay, I'm taking over. I'm fully possessing you, and I'm going to ruin your fucking life. And that is exactly what happens. Shit goes down by the end of this book. It's pretty intense, but it was really well written. It was so good. It was so spooky. I wouldn't say that it scared me. Like, it didn't make me go, but it did give me the, ooh, like the creep factor and like that feeling of just like the fact that it's possible to be possessed. Like, I do think that is a thing. I do think it can happen. And so reading it happening just gives that like creepy vibe even more, you know? So I would say that possession horror is one of my favorite horror genres. I also love a good like cozy horror if I'm not in the mood to be scared per se. And then I love like cult type horrors and things like that. But anyway, that was my 3.5 star review. It was also very fast paced and it was dual timeline. So we flash back to when she's a kid and then we jump back to adult Sarah, or sorry, adult whatever her name was. Can't remember her name. And then I read a thriller. I'm very picky with thrillers because it takes a lot to surprise me. So I'm very just particular with my thrillers and I rate them very hard because if it doesn't deliver, it's not getting a good rating. Anyway, I read The Surrogate by Toni Hallan. I gave this 3.75. This is about a young woman who agrees to be a surrogate for these people because she needs the funds for college. She's kind of on her own. She's only like 20, I think. She just broke up with her boyfriend. So she wants the money, 50 grand. She agrees to do this. The baby's born and you can kind of guess it already. She does not give the couple the baby. She takes the baby and she's out. She runs. But there is so much more to it than that. There is so much more involvement. We see 4 POVs, dual timeline. We get an inside look at these characters' lives, aside from the fact that she did not stick to the surrogacy. We see like behind the scenes stuff going on. We see different sides to these characters, and it really makes you question like, who's the bad guy here? You know, like who's the bad person? Who's doing the right thing? And why? Like, why did she not give them the baby? And then in the end, which was very rushed, by the way, I did not appreciate that. Very, very rushed. But in the end, things just are so twisty, and I would not have really guessed some of the things that happen. So my issue with the book is the pacing was a little bit off for me. It just rushed through the important parts that we want to read, that we're waiting for, that we're angsty over. And then it slowed down during the parts that I felt we could have maybe had less of, like the fluff and the filler. Maybe like give us a little bit less of like some of the dramas of these characters and just like get us to the point, to the parts we really want to read. Slow it down for us so that we can really take it all in. It kind of just like smacks you in the face and then you're like, whoa, wait, what? Let me rewind here. And so that's kind of how the ending went. Very, very rushed, but so good at the same time. So I gave it a 3.75, maybe a little high. Maybe it's more of like a 3.5, but either way, it was a good thriller. It thrilled me. It did its job. I read a little cutesy romance. I read The Devil You Know by Veronica Eden. This is the special illustrated edition, adorable cover. And you can't really tell, but I did tab it a lot, but I didn't do it the right way, so you can't even tell it's tabbed. I didn't stick them out the way that I did for the other books, but like it's tabbed, you know? So this is about 2 people that are childhood friends to lovers. That's the trope. But it's also fake dating and it's also secret dating. I really liked this book. It was a little slow in the beginning, a little cringy in the beginning. I would say the first 30 pages, I was like, do I even want to read this? Is this a waste of time? And then I got through it and I realized it's actually really good. The more you read, the better it gets. We get more in detail with the characters. We get to know them a little better. We get to see some spice, a lot of spice. Basically, they live next door to each other, and her brother is his best friend, but she's also friends with him because they've known each other their whole lives. And he is not doing so great in school, so in college. So she agrees to tutor him if he agrees to teach her sex. She's a virgin, and she wants to go to college knowing how to do things. It was a very kind of weird agreement to have. I don't know. I was kind of just like, that's kind of stupid, but but to each his own, I guess. It was really sweet though. So that was my 4.5 star. And then I read Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona. This is another short little horror book. This is a 90s slasher, very nostalgic, very fun to read. A lot of old horror movie references. The babysitter, who's also the main character, is a horror movie junkie, and she just references some of the greats. And she dealing with anxiety, so there is a anxiety representation in this, and it was pretty well done. This babysitter is watching these two kids, and there is somebody on the loose who is robbing houses and pranking people in the houses, not killing them, but just fucking with them a little bit. And so the babysitter is kind of on edge all night. You've got this sort of angsty, what's going to happen to the whole story. And then shit does happen. There's a lot of moments in this book that I felt weren't necessary. Like, I don't know, some things, if you read it, you'll know what I mean. But some things just got a little too dragged out. And then at the end, when things really happen and when we finally get to the part that we all kind of see coming, it's so rushed. And I just it took me a minute to even understand what was going on because it was just so rushed. And part of me thinks that the author did that as a way of being in the moment. Like, if this was a real scenario, you're really babysitting for these kids, the night's going to drag on. The night's going to be kind of slow because babysitting sometimes is. And then when the unexpected happens, it just bombards you, and it's fast and it's quick, and in your mind you're like, oh, what the hell is happening? So that's kind of how the book felt. So I get having that realistic aspect to it, but at the same time, as the reader, it was a little confusing, and it took me a second to sort of grasp what was even happening. There are a few supporting characters in the book that I didn't like. I didn't love the main character, but I didn't dislike her either. I just felt like she was a little annoying at some point. I really did not like the girl she was babysitting for. I think her name was Myra or something. I couldn't stand that little brat. I could not stand her. The boy she's babysitting for, his name is Ben. So cute. He's a little 6-year-old boy. He's just the cutest, sweetest little button. Oh, I loved him. He kind of reminded me of my own son in some ways. But anyway, this was pretty good. It's a 3.75 for me. It would have been more if it wasn't so weirdly paced, but I think 3.75 is good for a horror. It did give the creep factor. I kind of forced myself to read this because I did not like Twisted Love by Anna Huang. But I picked up Twisted Games by Anna Huang, which is the second book in the Twisted series, and I tabbed it. Look at all those tabs. They're just so pretty. I fucking love this book. I gave this book 4.75. It almost gave me the 5-star feel. The only reason that it was not a 5-star for me is because it was a little bit drawn out. It was a very long book. It took a very long time to get through. Like 2 days, which for me is a long time. If I'm reading a book consistently and I'm into it and it still takes me 2 days, that's how I know it's a long book. But this was so good. So it's a royal romance. She is a princess and he is her bodyguard. He's retired military. He's older than her, and he takes on her assignment, and he's her bodyguard. Everything is not going so smooth. They don't really get along in the beginning. And then as years go by, I think the feelings start to develop. He's a lot nicer. He lets down his walls. She doesn't, take his crap if he's rude or aloof with her. She puts him right back in his place and is like, no, you're not going to act like that with me. And they just have a really good chemistry. I really liked the characters. I thought that they were a good match. I want to say that they were opposites, but in some ways I think that they were very similar because they just got on so well. And neither one of them took anybody's shit in this book. So I really liked to read this. The spicy scenes were amazing once we got to part 2. Part 1 was more of the build-up of everything, and it was giving the backstory on the characters, which, by the way, Rise, or is it Reese? I think it's Reese. His childhood is effed up. There's your trigger warning. Effed up. I felt terrible for him. But it explained a lot why he was the way he was as an adult. I loved the ending. I was very happy with the ending. And honestly, it's giving me hope for the rest of the series, because if this book had sucked as bad as the first one, I wouldn't continue. The last book that I read in the month of June is Amber Lights of Alien Terror by W.R. Rawlins. This is a alien horror, and it's about this family who, the night before they're going on this trip out into the middle of nowhere in the mountains, they see a UFO fly over their town, and there's like multiple witnesses. They're not the only ones that see it. And then the next day, they are going on this trip up into the middle of nowhere in the mountains. And the wife is kind of like sketched out. It's a family of 4, and she's kind of like, I'm not really feeling this. We shouldn't go. The husband's like, no, honey, we need the kids to get off their electronics. We're going. And throughout the book, the dad was so annoying. I could not stand him. I just wanted to tell him to shut up, because the entire time, all he's telling these kids is what to do and get off your electronics. Stop with the iPads. Put the electronics down. Like, it's important that kids aren't on their electronics. And it's throughout the entire book, almost every other page. And it got to the point where I was like, is this alluding to something? Like, are these aliens coming here to like steal their electronics? Like, why is the dad so pressed? Why? So we get through this book, and this family are being stalked by these aliens, and obviously things go very south very quickly. Very fast-paced book. And at the end, there's kind of a lot going on at the end. I don't want to spoil it because it was pretty good, the ending. I actually was a little sad at the end, but it ended up fine. So anyway, I gave this a 2.75 because yes, it creeped me out. Yes, I'm not afraid of aliens, but yes, that is a horror trope that freaks me out a little bit if it's done the right way. Characters were damn near insufferable, and the writing style was very bland, like just not a lot of good verbiage, just very basic, almost like a high schooler could have wrote the book type of deal. Not to shit on this author or anything, because I do think that the plot was really good, and I think that the pacing was really good too. There's a moment in this book where they're watching this VHS of people that were previously at this cabin in the middle of nowhere, and they get some of these aliens on film, and that whole like part of the book was very, very creepy, because just imagine that, like, the mood was set, the scene was set, you're in this cabin with your family, you're literally all alone out there, you have a generator for power, these things are stalking you, shit is happening all around you, and then you're watching a homemade VHS of these things that are outside of your cabin right now on tape. Scary shit. So anyway, that was my wrap up for June. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you liked any of these books or didn't, or have whatever, you leave it in the comments. Chat with me. I like to socialize and talk about books. And feel free to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed my content. See you in my next video. Bye.